And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back from a new location, but with a familiar face. I'm joined by none other than blockchain Gandalf, Keir Finlow-Bates. He's taken time to leave the forest and come to a place with internet connection and a video screen. And we are today going to talk about his new book, Smart Contract Innovation. I have a signed copy here already, wonderfully signed, kindly signed by Keir in London not long ago, and some other things besides. Keir, how are you doing today? Are you well?
Very well, thank you. It's we're in the middle of spring. I've just been tapping birch sap from the birch trees, so I'm all rejuvenated and energetic and feeling pretty good.
And do you drizzle the birch sap on pancakes or mix it into tea?
It's like water. So you drink a glass every morning, and it's supposed to help immunize you against birch pollen. So I'm going to see how well it works this year.
Fantastic. And can it prevent you from being rug pulled?
No.
Only if you put it on the bottom of your shoes?
Well, maybe if you get distracted into tapping birch sap and don't go on the internet and start gambling with your hard-earned crypto.
That's one way to stay away from prediction markets for sure. For those people listening in on LinkedIn, you know the drill. This is a LinkedIn Live. So if you have questions for myself or for Keir, anything about smart contracts, about legal smart contracts, about koans, about where blockchain Gandalf is going to be found next in the world, add those into the comments now. And also give your own projects a shout out. Give us your GMs. Let us know where you are in the world. And we'll try and see if we can tailor the content we produce today to what it is you're working on or things that you're interested in. Keir, as always, let's start with, I think what's becoming familiar for when we do live streams is, why the hell did you feel inclined to write another book?
Right. Well, obviously, I'm clearly a serial masochist when it comes to authoring stuff. It appears that every 2 or so years, 3 years, I wake up one day and this inexplicable urge has appeared to write down what I've learned over the last 2 or 3 years. And it usually comes together and I've almost fully formed. Each of the books that I've got out there, I had the overview of what it was going to look like literally overnight. Woke up one day and thought, I'm going to write a book about this. And this one's about smart contracts. I did promise it about 5 years ago, but the time was now.
You had other stuff going on between now and then, such as the Authorverse, raising 75 children, tapping birch trees.
Yeah. And there was a bit on tokenomics in the middle.
Not just any tokenomics as well, Keir, evil tokenomics specifically. Yes. For those who haven't seen Keir's previous book, under a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one I wrote in 10 days. This one, I think start to finish was just over 2 months.
And you're going to have to get the question because this is the era of AI and agents. And I read something yesterday that something like 2/3, something like 60% of new books are just AI generated slop that is just descending on the Apple, Amazon, and various other bookstores. How much AI was involved in the making of this particular literary work?
Well, I did use AI. What I did not do is prompt it, copy paste, and never read it. So I used AI in 2 ways, actually. The first one was to help me plan the structure. Because if there's one thing that AIs are good at, LLMs specifically, it is ingesting a large quantity of material and kind of doing the equivalent of a human being, keeping it in mind. So I found it very useful, for example, for analyzing patterns, because you get a long document and it'll just kind of quickly slurp it all up, and then you can start questioning it. And then you can start asking questions about, I've got these chapters, I'm not very comfortable with 5 following 4. Should I move them around? And it'll give some suggestions, and half of them are junk, or 80% of them are junk. But every now and again, it comes up with something, and it kind of resonates with what I was probably sort of thinking already. And then it's like, right, yes. So it's helpful in that respect. And then I used it as a spell checker and a grammar checker, and to a thesaurus sometimes, I'll confess. But what it's not full of, this book doesn't contain vast quantities of M dashes. It doesn't contain the word actually every other paragraph, things like that. So, and I think that's the way that AI should be used in authoring. I don't see any problem with that. What I do have a problem with is if someone types in, write a book about smart contracts, and just prompts it again and again and copy pastes it. And then you end up with books where on page 16 it says, is this acceptable, or would you like me to generate more material for you? Right? So if you find one in there, I have put it in there on purpose. No, you won't. I've proofread it. I am convinced that every paragraph has been thoroughly, initially drafted by me, fed through AI, and then possibly reworked, possibly not. But I have never copy-pasted chunks. So
fair enough. So this is authentic blockchain Gandalf content written by your own hand, and right. I guess some embellishment from some support. But I think, like you said, that's probably fair. Having a little bit of QA done by real humans or by non-real humans. Not going to lie, I may have received a pre-release version. That's what you get for going and traveling to Finland and stalking Gandalf until he tells you to go away with the bribery of a new book. And I think that's it. Would you say that the AI enhanced process of book writing was any more or less stressful than your previous attempts?
I think it helps. One of the problems I had with my first book, Move Over Brokers, is that it took 14 months. And part of that was a 4-month writer's block period over the summer, where I was sitting down almost every night and resisting the temptation to reach for the whiskey bottle, because it was just, I can't do it. And I think if I'd had an LLM then, I could have used it to unjam things. So, and I like working on multiple things at the same time, but it can get a bit chaotic. So the LLM allowed me to jump between topics and get a quick recap of what exactly had I written, what was the point of it, and then you can move on. And that way you can work on multiple chapters at the same time. And it's a bit like having a sort of a parliamentary secretary sitting next to you who's taking notes and then prompting you, sir, this is what you were supposed to be doing next. So
for when things get super busy and you sort of forget where you are in train because you're running so many different things, and a household and a family, and or you've got workmen outside digging up your garden because your pipes are frozen, these sorts of things.
Well, the kind of things that happen to everyone all the time. And I think really it's, you can even say, I feel blocked. Here's this manuscript. What do you think I should work on, given that I'm feeling in a kind of, I'm feeling mathematically sharp or dull, for example, then it'll, and then as you ask the question, actually, half the time you get the answer. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm blocked, but I am feeling mathematically capable today. I should work on the quantum signature chapter. Today I'm feeling a bit brain dead. I'll work on regulation, of course, right?
Got it. Again, I think people who are authentic creators of content, people who genuinely care about producing things that will impact others from their own experience, will create content that is authentic and unique. Those people who want to generate followings, impressions, and just churn stuff out there without a perspective or a point of view will probably fall foul of creating more AI slop because they don't have original content to issue. But I don't think that's ever likely to be your problem, Keir. Before we go any further and we go more deeply into the new book, I just want to do a kind of quick check on the other things people know you being famous for. So clearly the Walk in the Woods are still going. We've been watching those. The Orthoverse, your ill-fated metaverse venture, still doomed?
Well, obviously the contract is still on the blockchain, and you can therefore buy and sell Orthoverse tokens. However, the web server that serves up the virtual world is no longer running. So the Orthoverse has gone into the great archive repository in the sky.
So as was prophesized, doom.
Yep, I didn't lie.
I feel like 10 out of 10 for manifesting, but probably 1 out of 10 for direction on that manifestation, Keir. For your next project, maybe aim higher.
Probably. But it was good fun. We had a good laugh.
Didn't we all when the metaverse was a thing? And now Mark Zuckerberg has cancelled it, and so there will be no more.
Yeah, I still remember us jumping around on the tops of virtual trees and racing to the throne room.
Great fun, like Roblox or Minecraft, but better and with friends and without any of the toxicity or in-game payments. So I think we did a good job for the times, and I want to see some form of the Autoverse come back somewhere, somehow. Or maybe now we just do that kind of post-COVID thing where we meet up in person and we run around places and tell stories.
Jump from tree to tree, right?
Yes. And jump from tree to tree. Exactly right. Exactly right, Keir. So that's enough nostalgia. Let's jump into the content for today, which is smart contract innovation, and more specifically, some of the, I think, important observations you've made on smart contracts, blockchains for the real world, and some of the problems that we still have that most of our industry hasn't realized. A little bit cryptic, but we'll get into that. And then obviously at the very end of the show, we'll talk about why you should never drink vodka and go and watch Hamilton. I'm going to leave no more context than that, but that's how we have to end the show. Let's walk some people into the content to start with. Smart contracts. What are they? Why do they matter? And why did you write an entire book about them?
Right. So smart contracts are small computer programs that are deployed to blockchains, stored on the blockchain, and can then be triggered by individual users through a blockchain wallet transaction. And the neat thing about them is that they create a single view of the world. It's kind of like there's this data on the blockchain, and in smart contract blockchains, you're changing that data, and it's much more flexible than Bitcoin. So you can do more complicated things, and you can chain events and things like that. But ultimately, they are small programs that are publicly available for people to interact with and run. And by running them, you change data. And then that's quite abstract, in the same way that a database is something that has data in it, you can change it. Of course, ultimately, it's what does that data mean? And that's the key here, is that with Bitcoin, you're kind of stuck with it represents Bitcoins and who owns them and when they've been transferred and how much and so on. With a smart contract blockchain like Ethereum, it just gets much, much bigger. So you have more opportunity to be creative and build your own financial or whatever constructs on top of it, and still get all the blockchain decentralization, single view of the world, censorship resistance with caveats, and that kind of thing.
Got you. So in slightly less technical language, we've created an application that can run on infrastructure that's really hard to take down.
Yep.
That actually is really quite cheap to store because it exists once it's launched and is there perpetually, and can serve, interact with, and manage data between individuals, companies, other applications, if they follow the rules of what that application is built to do.
Right.
So
yes.
It's like an unstoppable app.
Kind of, yes. Yeah.
And what do we do with these things? Now, having read the book, I know, spoiler alert for those people, this is going to sound like I don't know what Keir's going to say next, but I do have some inkling of what he's going to say next. But as you were writing the book, what were the use cases that you pointed towards for smart contracts that you think have actually demonstrated usefulness?
Right. So the most fundamental one is the token. With something like Bitcoin, you're stuck with Bitcoins. And then we had Casey Rodamore's ordinals, but that's kind of about it. With a chain like Ethereum, you can instantiate your own token, set up your own rules for how it behaves, and then promote it as representing something and build a market around it. And then you can build other pieces to allow people to exchange it, to lend it, to lock it up in escrow, things like that. So that's kind of the big use case at the moment. And that's why most of what goes on Ethereum is about tokens. But of course, there's a whole lot more.
Of course, and with the concept that the token is the technical instrument, but as you described, what that token represents can be property, can be value, can be a share in something. Applications that relate to finance, property management, intellectual property management, computer games, betting slips, the representation that those tokens can take on is why that's interesting and is what we do with it.
Right. But of course, the thing is, the chain itself is just the data. It's what we then do outside in the real world that gives it meaning. So if we all agree that these tokens are going to represent a currency for our little community, that we're going to use, I don't know, to keep track of who did the chores around the house or something like that, and then it works. It's the kind of, it's like a localized version of the mass delusion of money, right? I mean, money is the same kind of thing. We invented it because it's useful, but it works because we as a collective group of human beings think it has meaning. If everybody woke up tomorrow and all the 95% of the world's population said, we don't think the US dollar is a currency anymore and we refuse to have anything to do with it, its power and its usefulness would collapse globally. We don't, because we're creatures of habit, but we could technically.
We certainly could. Everything's a Ponzi if you zoom out far enough, or everything's a belief system if you zoom out far enough. I think the nice thing with smart contracts is actually we're not just talking about humans making choices based on emotional belief. You're also saying that other programs, other companies, AI agents can interact with that smart contract, and it's absolutely clear what's going to happen when you call it. Right. There's no hiding behind the service level agreements or any of the contractual agreements. Behind it, it's if you run this code, you will get this outcome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right. As opposed to if I buy this car from you, it may do any number of different things, and there may be many different unhappy paths for you in terms of recourse.
Right, but I mean, that's the thing with computer programs, and even more so with mathematics, is it comes across as much more deterministic than the messy real world of internal combustion engines and cars.
Indeed. And so then smart contracts do lend themselves to applications or industries or business processes or transactions that need to be or should be deterministic, because the computer program cannot do interpretation. It cannot do variables beyond the ones that are programmed. And so therefore, probably why we found ourselves managing digital assets, IP, and finance with smart contracts primarily, because those things are inherently digital and deterministic, or required to be deterministic. And so that leads me nextly onto the obvious question, which is how do you magically turn a smart contract into a legal contract?
Right.
Because where code meets the real world, where humans interact with businesses, or where businesses interact with businesses, or governments interact with anybody, there is some sort of expectation that we are protected by the law, or that there is some legal backing to the activity we do, because that's what society requires. In Web3, I think famously, through a number of exploits, rug pulls, malfeasance, ignorance, etc., we've seen people lose data, people lose money, people be exploited, and there is no recourse because the blockchain does the blockchain things and there is no wrapper around it. So how do we fix this?
Right. So this turning smart contracts into legal contracts, that's kind of a part of one of the pieces that allow you to complete the puzzle. And actually in chapter 4 of the book is where I start talking about that. Initially looking at this thing that people say, smart contracts are not smart and they're not contracts. And they're right, they're not smart. It's just a computer program and it's not running a neural network or an LLM on it or anything like that. So you can't even pretend that perhaps in some way it's smart. And similarly, contract, I think, was not a great name for it, because I guess what the Ethereum guys were going after was the idea that it's binding, that it'll, what we were talking about, it being deterministic. But that's a very computer scientist way of looking at the law, thinking that a contract is like a computer program. And contracts are not. Contracts are interpreted by courts. And that's sort of what I talk about on the first page of chapter 4, where, the law tries to codify and cover all cases and be deterministic, but ultimately we rely on human beings interpreting it. And it has to be like that because the world changes, right? I mean, we live under very different circumstances and problems than, say, people did in the Middle Ages. So we have a whole bunch of laws that make sense to us that would not make sense to them. And similarly, they had a bunch of laws that don't make sense to us. And we have managed to remove some of them. But of course, you have some of these legacy laws that still hang around, because it always seems to be easier to add more laws to the legal system than it does to remove them.
Is that like the ones about being able to remove the fingers of French people for being archers, or being able to urinate on the back tire of your vehicle?
Or you're not allowed to, give a donkey a bath on a Tuesday in Arkansas or stuff like that. I don't know if that's a real one, but it's the kind of thing that crops up, and they sound crazy. I think you're allowed to conduct archery practice across a broad street in Oxford or something on the first Saturday of each month. They have things like that, which makes sense when you're at war with the French. Doesn't make so much sense hundreds of years later when nobody knows how to draw a bow. Sorry, you're going to say?
Indeed. I was about to say, for those people listening in, and this will feel a little bit like a sermon, or maybe a little bit like a class, but for those people reading along, please turn your books to chapter 4. Where I'm hoping this doesn't become like sort of the episode of whatever TV show it was where your man's kind of flicking through the Bible for a particular verse, and sort of 17 minutes later, he's still looking for the particular verse.
Right.
Exact coding snippet as sort of on, if you turn to page 74 and you go through sort of level 17 of the code, you'll be able to see the exact operation that I've conducted here. We're not going to go to that length, but maybe for those people who will one day read the book, but maybe want the précis before they get there, what are some of the features at law that we would need to or should be starting to execute with smart contracts to be able to see more adoption of these type of applications?
Right. So the big one in this chapter is end user license agreements or terms and conditions. And whenever you get a bit of software, especially if it comes from Microsoft, you're faced with a legal document with like, I agree, I accept. And you just hope that halfway through it doesn't say that they're going to, they have a right to claim your firstborn and sacrifice them.
Or wash your donkey on a Tuesday.
Exactly. Even worse. Yeah. But so what I was looking at with this idea is that you have a smart contract and you can make it that the user can't interact with it until they agree with an off-chain end user license agreement. So the contract will point you to through a URL to the company website where the legal contract is, and then you sign a hash of that contract and submit it to the smart contract on chain, and that then checks, yes, this is indeed the hash of the legal contract. I can now take that as evidence that the user interacted with the contract. You can't guarantee that they read it, but you can never guarantee that anybody has read a contract they signed.
And that solves a little bit the problem of having to have the contract on chain, lots of block space, and also the issue with requiring to point to an off-chain oracle, because you can say in this particular point in time, this particular artifact was hashed and acknowledged.
Yes.
So even if the Authorverse web server goes down, you can still say that you've signed up with the Authorverse T's and C's before entering.
Earlier on, right. And you've digitally signed it with the private key from your blockchain wallet. So that also counts as a signature. Only once you've done that can you start calling functions in the contract. So that then gives you something that if you go to court and the person says, well, I never saw the end user license agreement, it's like, well, you digitally signed it. So now that provides evidence to a company that the user has actually at least gone and had a quick glance at the contract. And then the second thing is, of course, terms and conditions often update. So if the contract changes, then the text of the contract changes. That means the hash of the contract changes. And that means that the administrator of the smart contract can update what hash is expected to be signed. And you can say, right, the fact that you signed the previous one doesn't count anymore. You have to sign again because the things have changed. And of course, you don't have to do it for every minor difference. But if there's a substantive legal change in the relationship between the user and the service provider, then that is occasionally required. There needs to be some evidence that you are now aware of the fact that service fees have gone up by 5%
or whatever else it could be. And frankly, at this point, that's what's happening in the back end. For those people listening in who don't do back end, the front end of this is the update terms and conditions. Do you accept? And
Yes,
through
exactly.
your sign-in process and through data exchanging with the smart contract, that information is logged, but that doesn't mean that you need to understand all of the lines of code in the smart contract. You can obfuscate away the complexity for the user, but that's making sure that the history of attestations is kept.
Right. And the key thing is it binds a smart contract and a legal contract together, which is not something you see out there at the moment. And we had this problem, particularly with NFTs, right, where people didn't know what they were buying. I bought an NFT. Does that give me exclusive copyright usage of the image associated with it? In practice, it turned out that most NFTs, all you did was own the identifier on the blockchain. And the fact that it contained a URL pointing to an image on a server somewhere was meaningless.
And now we're starting to, or at the time we saw a spate of sort of applications or NFTs, PFP style image digital art, where in the metadata was the terms and conditions and the basic rights, albeit they'd never be able to put enough characters to get a 20-page legal document in there. At least they covered some of it from an IP usage standpoint, which was sort of cool, but also at the same time kind of largely unnecessary when you're able to do exactly what you've described.
And the original developers completely missed this because they didn't have any kind of understanding of intellectual property law. So they just kind of went, cool, we created them, and sort of, I guess they magically expected that everybody would understand what rights they were obtaining and not obtaining. And then metadata is typically stored off chain. So you're stuck with the issue that the administrators can change it and there's no record that it's changed. And then you're in a situation where if you were arguing in a court of law that you had rights, they could say, well, where's your evidence? So, right.
So there we go. So that was a quick format change,
right?
Because reasons.
Okay.
And to get closer, we're leaning in. We are digitally leaning in for the next part.
I see. Okay. Oh, this is better than Google Meet, where when you lean in, it sort of artificially moves you back.
Yeah, no, it kind of moves you around the place, and then no, we are actually leaning in for this part, which is the exciting topic of bringing debts to the blockchain. Didn't you once create debts as a token and issue them to everybody ever?
That was kind of the initial start of this idea, but it wasn't very well evolved because I had less understanding of accountancy at that point. For example, I still thought that debits were bad and credits were good, right? In terms of, because a debit is when they take something off you and a credit is when they give you something. And then I discovered that accountants and bankers have reversed the meaning, right? So in fact,
credit cards are to take money and have to pay it back, whereas debit cards are to give away the money that you have already earned.
Yes. So the meaning is, it's really weird that ordinary people say, I've got some, I've been debited, I've lost money. But a bank sees it as they've been debited, we've gained money, right?
I guess it's the terminology is created from the viewpoint of the one who wants to control the industry.
Right. Yes. And the accountants are the ones who they pay, so the accountants speak their language. So yeah, with the debts tokens, it was a kind of precursor to the idea, but it just struck me. Blockchains are all about. Blockchains are all about what you own, not what you owe, right? So everything is there for a debit, right? Have I got that terminology right? You see, it's so confusing. But anyway, it's about you having a positive balance, and then you may send some of it to somebody else. But everything is in terms of your assets rather than your liabilities. And I was thinking, well, this is kind of tricky for accountants because it means that half of the double entry bookkeeping system is missing. And people have noticed this before, and there are various approaches that have been taken, but none of them relied on generating a token that represented a credit rather than a debit. So if I own some, I don't know, USDC, let's pick a random stable coin, that's an asset of mine. And if I owe you some USDC, then that's a liability of mine. Now, how can I represent the fact that I owe you something on the chain? Well, we can use a token. So my balance for my USDC might be 1,000, and the fact that I owe you 500 USDC, we could have a kind of an LUSDC, a liability USDC. But you can't just implement that like a standard ERC20 token, because if I have 500 LUSDC and they behave exactly like all the other tokens out there, I can get rid of my liability just by transferring them to you or some random person, or burning them. And hey, my debts are gone. It's a bit like, the bank burnt down and all the filing cabinets caught fire, and now we don't know how much everybody owes on their mortgages and stuff like that.
The dog ate my correspondent bank. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So you have to change the way that a transaction works. And in particular, when you own something, you have the right to decide whether you hold on to it or whether you give it to somebody else. That's kind of definition of ownership. When you have a debt, it's not like ownership anymore. It's somebody else. The lender is the one who basically decides whether you have fulfilled your debt or have not. So you need to have a token where you can only transfer it if the transferee, the person it's going to, agrees to it. So you're kind of reversing who has the right to make the transaction. But again, it can't just be anybody, because I can create a throwaway address, say, yeah, I'll take those off you, and then delete my private keys and any evidence on my computer that that wallet ever existed, and now the debt has somehow magically disappeared. So there's a few pages in the chapter there about how you can have a token where the transfer mechanism is reversed and how you protect against malicious sort of pool transfers that come with this, with traditional tokens having effectively a push transfer because the owner pushes them to the recipient. So that was a sort of fun idea, and it's the kind of thing where I would love to see people in the accountancy and financial industries actually have a look at it and see how it could be used to help them with the processes that they use to perform generally accepted accounting practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much all of finance at this point has realized that 24/7 trading is a good thing, right? 2 extra days to make money, or 2 extra days for our customers to lose money. So if they're already wedded on the idea that we're going to see more interactivity between banks in an automated way, including agents, including, if all it is buying and selling stuff at a value, that's fine, because it's less complicated than what you described in terms of debts or liability management or management accounting for those things. But that feels like the natural next step to me, at least. So it's the direction of travel. I mean, I guess the obvious question to all of this is, well, okay, Gandalf, you've spotted that we need to make smart contract legal. There's some features that we need to build that enable us to see wider use of blockchain technology in everyday life, in business, in finance, in governance, or in government. Why did you write the book, and what are you going to do about it? What's the so what here for you?
Right. So this actually touches on the overarching idea behind the book, which is encapsulated in the word innovation in the front of it. And I talk at the very beginning of the book about the difference between inventing and innovation. And I've done the inventing with some colleagues at a company I work for. And the innovation part is where people take the tools and actually start applying them. And if you look at invention over history, somebody comes up with something like a steam engine, and initially it gets ignored because horses are great. And then one person goes, actually, this might be better than horses for draining tin mines in Cornwall. So they then take that engine and they build a mine draining system. And then other people come along and say, well, I could do that more efficiently. And another person comes along and says, hey, rather than having it being stationary, what if we made it move and you could sit on it? It would be like, So the innovation stuff is the kind of, you have these flashes of insight when you can make a major change. And then there's a period of time where people who generally are not in the kind of beginning of Geoffrey Moore's sort of curve of adoption, they tend to be conservative laggards. They don't tend to pick up early. So there's that time for it to be accepted. And then you have this kind of like a I don't know, Renaissance period where just everything takes off. So what I'm trying to do here is give a little bit of a kickstart to getting up that beginning of the curve. Get us into a Renaissance a bit earlier, because I feel we've been a bit stagnated in smart contract blockchains like Ethereum. We've been playing around with the same two token types, fungible and non-fungible ones, a bit of digital exchange stuff, and people just churning out the same cookie cutter stuff with a few little tweaks here and there.
It does feel a little bit like, 2016, 17, we're going to decentralize everything. And you see a bunch of investment and energy around intellectual property, music, real estate, rare assets, art, physical and digital, and a bunch of kind of slightly less or more mundane stuff on the side around accounting, around supply chain management, around single sources of data, and so on and so forth. And that was sort of the acceleration of the tin mine example, I think, that you gave, which was a bunch of people saying, well, I'm going to apply everything I know about smart contracts to what little I know about an industry where it might fit. And I'm going to try and hope that those two things create mass adoption. And the reality is you didn't have enough of both things. You had some depth of knowledge about the technology, but not enough about industry or the law or the ability to build something with the right user experience that actually works.
Or the reverse,
now, exactly, which would be worse. You've got a bunch of business people saying, oh God, I've got to have a blockchain now. Let's create the Long Island blockchain company. And suddenly with the power of crypto and blockchains, we'll transform everything we do. Which is also impractical, because transformation requires an understanding of what you're going to do before and what you're going to do after and how it's going to work better, more effectively, more costly. And just I guess finance knew that. Yes, if you have one nearby. And so I suspect Wall Street or asset managers or the rest of finance understood this quite clearly at the time. The idea of 24/7 trading or kind of permanent markets was always available, but there were some things that got in the way, such as regulatory clarity, such as technology maturity, such as privacy. But they feel now they've got past those hurdles, and it's probably time for the rest of industry to get there also. But we're not quite there. So how do you help?
Well, this is kind of the second stage, right? So we've gone through this first thing, and the stuff that you're talking about, 2016, 2017, when we started seeing DeFi stuff, it was incredibly complex to most people. We're talking about bonded curves and slippage and stuff like that, over collateralized debts, and then underneath it there was all this maths and these white papers full of in latex, full of equations, right? And
all I heard was bondage curves and latex. and I'm astounded we haven't got further with these things.
Yes, well, we would have if we'd used it like that, I suppose. But so the thing in this book is that there's this code which is for the kind of CTOs who still get their hands dirty, but the text between the code, and anybody who is not into coding, you can skip anything in a grey box, and it's not going to influence your reading of the book. So I'm trying to explain the concepts behind these inventions in a way that hopefully will trigger people to go, well, these are a whole new set of Lego blocks, right? I've been working with a box of 4x2 blocks and 2x2 blocks, and now suddenly I've got technical Lego, and it makes sense to me because I actually know what a wheel is and what an axle is and what a cog is, and I can do a whole lot more. And so the thing with this book is you can just go into it and grab a chapter and read about a new idea behind a token. And if it happens to gel with the right person, I mean, that's my hope, is that they'll look at something and go, oh, tokens that can own tokens. I'd never thought of that. And that would be so useful for, and then they go, for X. But it does mean that you have to explain what exactly does this mean. And that's what I'm doing in the book. So, I've worked in companies shipping product in the past. I've been in test engineering, so kind of at the end stage when we get what the developers thought that the product managers wanted, and we're kind of making sure that firstly they've implemented the spec, and secondly, we actually go and talk to the product managers and say, is this really what you wanted? So you're kind of acting as a gateway as well. So I've been through plenty of product shipping crunches, but I enjoy the invention stage a lot more. So I'm quite happy to say, look, here are some design patterns that you can use and some concepts that you can use, and I'm full of use case suggestions as well. I'm not just kind of going, isn't this a neat? I'm out of mathematician mode. There are real use cases described, and also in broader terms, so people can say, okay, that's put my thoughts in the correct direction, and that's an area I know about, and this is how it should really be used. So that's the opportunity. But what I can't do is go out there and take my non-existent $1 billion and set up companies to try and create products that nobody wants. That's not my game.
So philanthropically, you've created some of the modules or components where smart contracts meet the real world and said, this is the space where you should be spending your time focusing on building things that work practically for non-blockchain native businesses. Right. Because there are more non-blockchain native businesses than there are not. And so if we're going to see the last 10 years of innovation in Web3 and blockchains and crypto mean something, we've got to really start doubling down on these areas. So identity, IP, legal rights, legal contracts.
Right. Recourse.
That's an important one. Give us a beat on recourse.
Right. So recourse is interesting because it's where regulation meets technology, right? And it's a piece that is missing from blockchain. Intentionally, originally, I mean, the whole idea that Satoshi Nakamoto had about Bitcoin was that it would be like cash, where if you hand over a £5 note to a market trader and you walk off with your bag of apples, you can't undo that. Or rather, you can if you run back and threaten to clock him one. But in practice, when you hand over cash, it's an irreversible transaction. But that's not how most transactions take place these days. If I buy something with my credit card online, I have a right under EU law to change my mind within 14 days and get my money back. So being able to reverse transactions is actually considered quite important. And if we move on to stable coins, which are trying to be like digital representations of currencies, they do come with a very crude way to reverse a transaction. In fact, it doesn't reverse a transaction. It's the sledgehammer approach of freeze and burn. So that's very useful when a criminal or terrorist organization has a wallet that contains millions of stablecoin dollars, and the FBI identifies this, and they go to the stablecoin issuer and say, freeze this wallet because of this, and here's an injunction telling you you need to do it, and then seize the money off them. That will involve some pretty senior staff in the stablecoin issuer company to sign off on it, typically the CFO and the chief compliance officer. And that's why there are merely hundreds of these kind of things in a year, not tens of thousands. Now, compare this to the fact that MasterCard wrote an article last year, and it's referenced in the book, that predicts that by 2028, credit cards will experience 1 million chargebacks a day. Right, so there's I think it's 800 or 880,000. So that's the number of transactions that they expect, given current trends, will take place with credit cards. That for one reason or another, typically the buyer, but it can also be the merchant saying, actually, I have to revert that because I haven't got the goods. It turns out.
Got you. So three drivers to that one: wider access to credit for individuals. More people sad at home and lonely because of the internet and agents, therefore more people inclined to buy things frivolously on the internet, amplified by agents prompting you to buy things frivolously on the internet because they're doing your bidding now, or vice versa.
Right, and then changing your mind. And can you imagine using the existing stablecoin freeze and burn mechanism to revert 1 million transactions a day?
needing a legal injunction and having to call Jeremy Allaire and friends
Yes.
on the weekend to come in and say, I've bought a few pairs of leopard colored pants that I thought were a good idea at the time, but my wife thinks I'm an idiot. Can I send them back, please?
And now someone with the title of Chief Compliance Officer in a stablecoin issuer is supposed to look at this and decide whether, and then if they decide, yes, we need to refund the $12.95 they spent on this, what they do is they go to the merchant and they freeze their entire $200,000 account, destroy all the tokens, reissue 199,990 to the merchant, and $12.95 to the buyer. It's not practical. So in one of the chapters of the book, and I picked this one, it is it's a retail level one, right? So it is a business to consumer level problem, but it's the most kind of one. It's the one that reminded me most of a crazy ant heap. I mean, there are recourse from business to business is different, and I have a whole bunch of thoughts and ideas on that. But I thought the consumer one would be a good one for the book because it's something that people understand. People have disputed credit card transactions or debit card transactions in the past, and the existing blockchain infrastructure doesn't provide a mechanism that allows that to be done in a sensible way. So,
but you have offered some solutions to how that might work.
Yeah, there are some smart contracts actually that would allow the stablecoin issuer to be able to escalate automatically or semi-automatically these things, so they can handle a bunch of them just automatically. Then they can start flagging ones where it looks like people are misusing the system, the scale of the transaction that's to be reverted. Clearly, you don't want to spend a lot of time dealing with a $3.50 chargeback. You do if it's $35,000 or $350,000. So there's a whole layer of stuff that allows it to percolate up to the point where some of these things the CFO and the CCO are going to have to sign off on. And it meshes neatly with the way that credit card companies actually handle this at the moment. They have, sort of recourse officers at various levels of seniority to handle the different levels of severity of the recourse requested. And Brian just said there's arguably nothing wrong with leopard colored pants. I agree, and my wife would too.
And it depends very much on the eye of the beholder. Again, very similarly. So, you're having a rough weekend with your agents and you think, oh, well, you know what it is? I'm going to quicken myself by buying a Ferrari, and I'm going to have that Ferrari delivered to my door, and then I'm going to drive around with it, and I'm going to feel better about myself. And then you realize instantly that you look like an idiot, and there you go. Either it's self-awareness or somebody else points it out to you. Either way.
Yes. Yeah. Unless you're wearing leopard-colored pants, right? And then
leopard-colored pants and a Ferrari, and at that point, you're probably in Miami and it's normal.
Right. Yes.
If you're in rural Finland, probably not so much. But then you're in the countryside, so no one's there anyway.
No one will see it anyway. Yeah.
As long as you feel good. Do what you want.
But you try driving a Ferrari over the country roads out here. It's
not going to try. So, Keir, where can people find your wonderful book? How can people get hold of Smart Contract Innovation? Is it available on some well-known online marketplace?
Yes, which I'm not going to mention by name, other than allude to the fact that it's named after a South American river. And the way to find it is to go to mybook.to/SCI.
Right. Maybe you'd think I was fast enough to type that down, but I wasn't. So mybook.com?
No, mybook.to, because you've got to go to my book.
Very good. /
SCI.
SCI for Smart Contract Innovation.
That's right.
Here it is. Link to Keir's book in the chat down here, wherever it is.
Right.
So if you're interested in Smart Contract Innovation, if you're interested in Keir's thoughts on what more is needed to see wider adoption of blockchains and smart contracts, and if you're feeling compelled to go and build it or have your agent build it with you, this could be a good place to start. Who should be reading this book, Keir? Who are the people that you want to say, thank you, Keir Finlow-Bates. Thank you, Blockchain Gandalf. You unlocked this for me. I'm going to go and create $1 billion idea.
Right. So I, for the last 4 years, I've been the chief technical officer of a company called Artima Labs. And I've had to learn a lot about what being a CTO is in the process, because it's not about being a skillful coder or someone with a good architectural chops, or it's finding how business and technology mesh. And you're coming at it from the technology side, and you're acting as a translator into the business side. Whereas in business development, you have people who come up from the business side and they're trying to understand the technology. So it is a bit like trying to translate the subtitles of a movie from Finnish into, a Finnish movie into English, right? And then you kind of need somebody who's fluent in Finnish so that they understand what the point of the movie is. But you also kind of need somebody who's fluent in English, because a Finnish translator will produce English that just reads in a bizarre way. And so I see the kind of business development people and the CTO as kind of coming at the same problem from two different sides. So this book's aimed primarily at CTOs, which is why there is some code in there, just if nothing else to prove that the stuff there works, right? I mean, you can actually write that, you can type this code in and run it and see that the inventions that I'm talking about function. But also to get CTOs thinking about how they can talk with business development and assist them in what is feasible and what's available out there and what could be done relatively easy now that the thinking has been done, which is the scary risk part about how long does it take you to come up with this, and actually get implementing things. So CTOs first, and then of course, secondly, I've put enough amusing stuff in there and I've made the code easy enough to skip over. So business development too.
Absolutely. I mean, I would consider myself to be a semi-technical, non-technical person who's focused primarily on industrial change and transformation, and it reads well. You probably shouldn't read it tired, because actually this will challenge your understanding of Web3 and the rest of the world. So probably a morning rather than an evening read, or definitely something for a couple of 2 to 3 hour plane rides so you can get through it. But it certainly inspired me to understand a little bit better. Oh yeah, who's doing that today? Nobody. Okay, where would that sit in enterprise? Okay, it would probably sit in either legal or it would sit in product. Okay, why haven't we got there yet? And it definitely prompts a number of questions saying, well, this feels really obvious. I understand now why all the blockchain technology folk haven't been kind of clamoring about this, because they don't know how to. And everybody sat on the other side who's watching the English movie but only speaking Finnish is like, why am I watching this strange film in a language I don't understand? It scares me and I don't want anything to do with it. So a strong analogy here. And as a final thought, the dangers of drinking vodka and watching Hamilton.
Right.
So when we last met in London about 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, our evening of the book signing, again, which you very kindly signed this copy of your book, which I will cherish, ended with you having to apologize and run out the door, which either was incredibly well timed or a deliberate plan to give you an exit. Either way, you said, I've got to go and watch Hamilton. Wait a minute, let's just drink this vodka shot, which I suppose is probably your way of bringing Finnish culture to London, for which I'm very grateful. What happened next?
Well, actually, I think there needs to be a little bit more of a lead up, right? Which is you stalked me down tracked me down in the Finnish forests, and you brought along some Portuguese spirits, which were very nice, and which we probably consumed slightly to excess on one of the evenings.
It depends on how much practice you've had, but yes, sort of half a bottle of Madronio or a few glasses.
Well,
of
for this
was evening.
It was not excessive excess, but moderate excess.
Not Finnish levels of excess, but maybe British levels of excess.
Yes, but of course I'm not Finnish, so and I have managed to avoid getting to the point. I don't have the stamina that the average Finn has when it comes to this kind of thing. I'd still rather have pints of mild or bitter that you can drink in a session, and then partaking of shots. So, and then we were in the Bear and Staff in London, where again you surprised the hell out of me. because I'd only just seen you a month before, and suddenly you just turn up there. It's like, oh my God, it's happening again. Is the world actually much smaller than I thought it was? And you and Tanya were talking about Moscow because you've lived there. And so I thought it would be a neat idea to kind of help that reminiscence by going and buying some vodka shots for us all. Forgetting that I had promised my wife that I would turn up to go and watch Hamilton with her and 2 of my kids, and B, forgetting that we were in Leicester Square and Hamilton is in a theatre at Victoria. So having downed a shot of vodka, I suddenly realized that I now had something like 12 minutes to make it across London, including navigating all those escalators and stairs, which I'm not great at the best of time. I'm somebody who easily suffers from vertigo. And I think it was halfway down the Leicester Square tube station escalators that I suddenly realized that the vodka was hitting and the world was kind of, it looked like the escalator was just extending forward into infinity in front of me. Like a movie scene where they pull the camera back, but they focus in at the same time. And I made it to Hamilton on time to join my family in the queue. And I actually managed to pull myself together enough to seem like I was completely and utterly sober, because I said, I will just have a pint or 2. And my wife said, is Anthony going to be there? And I'd said, no, he's not. And it was only after the show had finished that I had to confess to her that I'm sorry, Anthony was there and we had a shot. So that's the story behind that.
I'm very happy to take the blame and to be considered as the bad influence for the vodka that you bought and then that we consumed. And on that bombshell, Keir, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for what I think is a super important contribution to the body of information and resource and reference materials for people building in Web3 with blockchains, with smart contracts. Looking forward to wherever we meet next, whether it be Finland, whether it be in an event somewhere in the future. Who knows where it might be, and you may least expect it, but at least one of us will be there.
Well, yes. Well, I can tell you that I won't be stalking you, but because I don't think I'm not the hunter type person. But yes, I look forward to it. It'll be great fun.
You live in the woods for a reason. Thank you, Keir. Have a brilliant rest of your day. Love to the family, and have fun out there.
Thank you.